Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. Welcome to the Erin Molan Show. It is so great to have your company wherever you are around the world. You know the deal by now. We appreciate you, we love you, and we thank you for choosing to spend some of your very valuable time here with us. In fact, even if your time is not that valuable, even if you have nothing else to do, even if we are your only option, we're still grateful. It's a huge show. My guest is David Kaufman, former editor of a big New York paper, current columnist for the New York Post and New York Times. Plus, guys, big news. Master Sergeant Ran Gavili is home, the final remaining hostage in Gaza. Thank you, God. We'll get into all of that, but first, here's a word from our partner. Now, New Year's resolutions sound great on January 1st, but by January 10th, well, not so much. This year, there's one resolution, though, that's actually worth keeping. Getting your finances in order. You need to do it. Now, for many people, that starts with balance, not just growth, but protection too. And this, my friends, is where Noble Gold Investments comes in. For over a decade, Noble Gold has helped investors add physical gold and silver to their portfolios, which can reduce exposure to market volatility and economic uncertainty. We cover so much of that here every day. And if this sounds complicated, I promise you it's not. It starts with a simple conversation about your goals. And Noble Gold, well, they take it from there. There's no pressure, there's no sales gimmicks, just clear answers and a strategy built around you, not this one-size-fits-all. So make this a year you stop putting off your finances and start getting them in order. Now visit noblegoldinvestments.com/Erin. That's noblegoldinvestments.com/Erin. Now make sure you also check out my interview with Colin Plume, who started Noble Gold Investments, so you can actually get to know the man behind the company. So Ran Gavili, the last remaining hostage in Gaza, is home. We've seen all these clips of the president of Israel, the ambassador, Mike Huckabee, different people taking off the yellow hostage pins. For the first time since 2014, there is now not a hostage, living or dead, from Israel in Gaza. That's a huge deal. Think about the lengths that Israel went to get this one body home. And yes, it's someone's world, absolutely, but there are not many nations in the world that would go to the lengths that Israel always do. Look at the reaction of the soldiers who found him. They shed tears because they know what this means. Not just to his immediate family, who, of course, have been fighting for this for so long, but for their nation, for Jews around the world. This is an element of closure for them. And then you look at the other side, the terrorists. You think they'd go to this kind of effort? Oh, they do. They go to this kind of effort to kill and destroy not just their enemy, but their own people as well, their own children, if they think it might hurt their enemy. But to bring the body or something of someone they love home, never. They don't care. They don't value what we value. Completely different. It's a very simple way of looking at which side you should be on, the side of good or the side of evil. It's really not that complex. I met his parents, Sergeant Ran's parents, a couple of weeks ago in Florida. And, you know, again, so stoic, so incredible, but you look into their eyes and they look dead inside, and you can understand that. I hope today brings them some life. It really does. His father has spoken since getting the coffin with his son's body back, and he said words to the effect of, "I'm so proud of you. The police are with you. The army's with you. You should see all of this for you." Can you imagine? Can you imagine? Again, that anyone's son should be coming home from anywhere in a body bag is tragic and heartbreaking. But this is the value that Israel puts upon its people, and why they will never, and why they should never, hold back when it comes to protecting them, because that is their job, that is their duty, and it is the right of every citizen there to know that their government, their military, their people will go to any length possible to bring them back. Of course, there is a downside to that because it shows those who wish Israel harm the value of taking people because of how much Israel values them. And that's a conversation for another day, and we will have that conversation. We've had that conversation. It's a really tough one, but it's a conversation that needs to be had as well. It desperately needs to be had, or the cycle will continue. And who loses in that cycle? Who loses? Now, back on American soil, and Donald Trump has put out a Truth Post social, letting everyone know that he's spoken to Minnesota Governor Tim Walz. Of course, this is off the back of Walz comparing ICE cleaning up pedophiles off the street with the plight of Anne Frank during the Holocaust. Absolutely despicable, disgusting. Every word you can think of that is negative, throw it in there. It's relevant. But of course, Trump, as he always does, he did the same thing with Mamdani. He said he had a great conversation, etc., etc., etc. Look, it looks like Trump is being the bigger man here and looking to just take a little bit of the heat out of the situation. Well, I mean, which is an ironic word given the snow and ice storms at the moment, but that needs to happen. And it's never going to happen on the behalf of these paid protesters. They're not protesters, agitators. It's never going to happen from the Democrats because they are pathetic and all they want to do is cause division and create chaos because it benefits them and it's a distraction. So it looks like Donald Trump is, doing something now to just take the heat out. Tom Homan is heading in. That's been announced as well. He's going into Minnesota. We haven't seen a lot of him lately. Remember at the start, he was always around. He was always talking. He was a real face of this thing. And then Kristi Noem kind of became that face. Well, old Apple man, he's heading back in. And anyone who can handle, idiots like this, I think is the man for the job. This is one of my favorite Homan moments. Have a look. And I wonder how Kristi Noem feels about this. It's fascinating, isn't it? I mean, she does a really good job. The press conference, I thought straight afterwards, and I watched it in its entirety, was interesting in that she was answering definitively things I don't think they could have really known at that stage. And that is dangerous. I mean, I'm all for backing your people. I am all for having a strong line. But if you don't know, it's okay to say to the media that you don't know yet, or that you're not sure, or that an investigation is coming. It's far better to say that. And you can still say, we support our men and women on the ground. But it's okay if you don't know the specific details. Something's just happened. Someone's been killed. It's a lot. You're allowed to say, I'm going to wait for that information. I don't have that detail yet. We're finding that out. We'll get back to you. It's okay to say that. And you need to, when you're in that position, being able to handle media and intensity and the aftermath of something like that is a big part of your job. And you cannot be saying things that you're not entirely sure of that will then be repeated everywhere if it turns out not to be entirely the case, because then it hurts you, it hurts the Trump administration, it hurts the ICE officers. So it's really interesting. That dynamic we'll watch with interest. But again, paid agitators trying to create chaos and stop ICE from arresting child abusers, that needs to stop. That needs to stop entirely. Yes, there's a right to protest. We all get that. But to impede on law enforcement when they are already under so much pressure, where they are being attacked from every angle, when you are armed with a weapon, no. You can't do it. No one wants anyone to die. It is horrific. It is tragic. But you cannot impede law enforcement officers when you are armed and it is a heightened situation. You just can't do it. You can't do it. A side note to this, clown show that has been spearheaded and encouraged and led by Walz and his, group of merry men. The Islamic regime of Iran has entered this debate on ICE. I kid you not. A spokesperson for the foreign ministry has come out and condemned the handling by US law enforcement, saying that they are violating human rights. I'm trying to figure out what goes on inside the heads of these people. And look, I have to assume that there are brains in there. I'm not sure. I haven't seen medical evidence, but I assume there are, because even to be evil, if you're really good at being evil, you've got to have somewhat of a brain. So they obviously know how ridiculous that statement is, given they've just killed tens of thousands of their own people intentionally, unarmed people intentionally. So then I move on to, okay, are they trying to be funny? Are they being cheeky? Are they trying to be clever? Is this a game to them, which makes them all the more sick? But you expect nothing better from them at all, do you? And then I wonder, do they actually maybe think that what they are doing is right and the rest of the world is wrong? Is there some way that the ideology has completely taken over every essence of their being, that they seriously look at what they are doing in Iran to protesters and think, yeah, we're helping. This is a good thing for humanity? No, of course not. They are evil sacks of beep who are just trying to antagonize. And look, normally they do it through their proxies and through other people and through their bots and through funding via Qatar and other entities. But, I mean, doing it directly is cute also, as well as completely pathetic, and it should be entirely ignored. But just to show you the depth of depravity that we are dealing with this Islamic regime. I now want to bring you my conversation with David Kaufman, who is in New York right now in the snowstorm and has an insanely good take on what is going on in America right now. Double standards is a phrase you will hear multiple times during this conversation, and at almost every single junction in it, you will go, yes, yes, yes. He's brilliant. Enjoy. David Kaufman, it is such a pleasure to have you on. And to be honest, it's not like you had a vast array of choices of other things to do right now, given you're stuck inside in the snowstorm. But that aside, I'm sure you would have chosen the Erin Molan Show anyway.
Absolutely. So it's been snowing for, I think, 10 hours now. It's going to snow for 10 more hours. I ran out first thing to do my little exercise, but I'm here. Nobody's going anywhere.
You're good, aren't you? I mean, exercise in New York, you're not too afraid, given your new mayor? It doesn't keep you inside in the fetal position in the corner?
I think we need to be as strong as possible for our new mayor, but he's on the case with this storm. He's looking after us. We'll be just fine. Ha ha. I don't know about that. I think we need to be as strong as we've never needed to be more fit or stronger with this new mayor. Clearly, the folks aligned with him are not aligned with us.
It's so interesting. There was so much talk in the build-up, and we've seen kind of bits and pieces, you know, his skits with Miss Rachel that are just utterly ridiculous, and to be honest, look like indoctrination of children more than some fun little social media skit. But what has life been like under him? And I guess it takes time for people to see changes, doesn't it?
Yeah, I actually think things are worse than we could have imagined. I think there was this hope that once the mayor was elected, he would temper down his rhetoric, that he would sort of adjust to sort of the nuances of what it means to lead New York City. But what you're seeing in many ways from the moment he was elected through inauguration and now to the first month is that he's really doubled down on his worldview, on his extremely anti-Zionistic view, on his antagonizing of Jewish groups, on his inability to really ensure that Jews in New York City, I guess Jews all over America, but particularly in New York City, exist with a true sense of safety and confidence in City Hall to look after us. You know, what the mayor has done for the first time ever is there's really been a formalization, if not institutionalization, of his anti-Zionistic worldview and the trickle-down effect that has with anti-Semitism and, of course, protests and riots and the mobs who have, gone through the streets of New York attacking Jews. So I think despite his performative surface efforts to, make Jews feel safer, I think many Jews actually feel far less safe.
I think you make such a key point there when you say the kind of formalization of it. You know, there have been people throughout history and in recent times that have had feelings that have been, quite frankly, awful. but there's been pressure on them not to share them, that there's been a societal expectation that they would never be said out loud, or let alone institutionalized or formalized. This mayor is making it normal to treat Jewish people, and, to be honest, all of us who believe in Western civilization, democracy, you know, the basics, unsafe and unwelcome.
It's not that he's normalizing it. He's almost daring people. There's a brazenness to it. There's an arrogance to it. I mean, you know, the mayor has refused to condemn phrases like globalize the Intifada. He's been careful to say that he personally wouldn't use those kinds of phrases, but he has not actually decried or denounced that phrase. Now, I don't have to tell you in Australia what globalizing the Intifada looks like. It looks like a 5-year-old girl named Matilda gunned down on a beach in Sydney along with 14 other Jews. That is what globalized the Intifada looks like. And that is why folks are so irate that he refuses to condemn it. Just like he sort of skirts around condemning Hamas, he hangs out with, you know, known supporters of religious fundamentalism and violent anti-Zionism like Mahmoud Khalil and Hassan Piker. I mean, he's, you know, kind of just, you know, almost, it's almost like an official FU to his critics. He's basically saying, I will do what I want. And it's similar to, in a way, to Donald Trump, in a sense that, you know, folks are on the left are very critical of Donald Trump, particularly right now because of what's been happening in Minnesota. But if you really look at what Donald Trump has done since he's gone into office, he's done exactly what he said he's going to do. There's no surprises, you know, whether it's DEI or immigration or Ukraine. And Mamdani is exactly the same way. The only constant of his ideological evolution from university to the mayor's residence, the city hall, has been an obsession with Israel and an entrenched, ingrained, aggressive, adversarial anti-Zionism and anti-Israelism. And that is what he has, you know, that's the rhetoric that he has brought to City Hall. Those are the folks he surrounded himself with. He's, of course, weaponized race and brought in all of these folks to sort of, you know, pit, you know, white people against black people, talk about white supremacy, all of the buzzwords. Interestingly enough, the only folks using this like racialized language against white people are mostly actually white people, which is what's so canny and tricky about the left, is that they deploy white people to bash other white people, knowing that nobody else will say anything.
That's exactly. Oh, can't be racist because she's white. She's white too.
Exactly.
The point you made about Bondi and the kind of from hate speech and whipping up this, again, you know, normalization of hate and delegitimizing Jewish people and Israel and all the lies that go along with that, eventuating in a mass slaughter of people. You mentioned the 14 others. One of them wasn't Jewish. And I think this is the point that I always try. And I mean, it was a Jewish event aimed at Jewish people. But what I try and say, because so many people say to me, you're not Jewish. Why do you care so much? Like, you know, I get it. It's really sad, but like, it's so weird. And I say to them, you know, when they're driving a car into a Christmas market, they're not checking whether you're wearing a Star of David or a cross. They want to kill and destroy everyone. They might be aiming at Jews initially, or that might give them a little extra buzz. They don't care. This guy was walking along the beach with his wife. He was not Jewish. He got killed. So I say to people, same as people in New York, you might think, oh, I'm not Jewish. It's not really my problem. It won't impact me. No, it will. And it does. Everyone is impacted when this kind of hatred exists and is allowed to fester.
And what's so interesting is that in this whole debate around Zohar Mamdani, you know, what I always latch onto, and this has been sort of a subtext of this entire post-October 7th moment, is the double standard that Jews are enduring today. The double standard of, you know, I say this as somebody who's Jewish and African-American, so I see how this works with black people. If I was a black person, well, I am a black person, but if I were to say as a black person, I'm experiencing racism, immediately in this country, everybody would rush to believe me, to support me, to ask me how I'm feeling and affirm me, because that's how the system works. You know, you believe minorities because they say they've experienced this. But the double standard is that only Jews have to justify, explain, prove that they're enduring this discrimination, and they're blamed for it. That's the irony. And what's interesting is that double standard, that is the anti-Semitism. That double standard is
Yes.
the anti-Semitism. That's exactly what Mamdani is operating off of. And like what you say so perfectly is that the double standard today applies to Jews, but it could easily tomorrow apply to somebody else. And that's why this
Absolutely.
existence of this double standard is so scary and it needs to be combated, because for today it's Jews, but it could be anybody in America one day around the world.
And you look at particularly that double standard, and it was, no more evident when it came to women on October 7
Of
and
course.
raging feminists in Australia who, again, I use this analogy all the time, but, a woman would be in the kitchen in her office at morning tea, and a man would say, "Oh, that's a lovely skirt.
Yes.
You sexual deviant, how dare you?" And 10 women would come and support her, and he'd be sacked, and they'd be, on the news saying this kind of, reducing us to how we look, etc., etc. Fine. Women raped on October 7. No, it was resistance. Show me evidence. It didn't happen. Like, it is insane how they were able to stay silent and still, look people in the eye, the feminists of the world, because they
Yeah,
were Jewish.
believe women except for Jewish women. And I also have a sort of another analogy. Like I look at, we recently celebrated the Martin Luther King holiday in the
You wrote a
United States.
great piece on this, a brilliant
Yeah.
piece.
And, I look at the way in which, the pro-Palestinian movement was out in full force, trying to like latch on to this holiday, latch on to the Black civil rights struggle. I mean, the pro-Palestinian movement has been incredibly effective in latching on to every movement, the Queers for Palestine, the feminists, and then they've really, they really targeted the African-American history last week with the MLK holiday. And I think to myself, how much that offends me as somebody who's African American. I mean, my own father and aunt.
Okay, so I found my brand new obsession, and all the other things that I was obsessed with. Please make way, make room. Balance of nature. This is awesome. As someone who travels so much, is insanely busy, a single mum, I don't have capacity to be cooking every night or to be making sure, and it's so important, I know, but that I've got enough vegetables and fruit and my daughter does. Everything else always takes precedence, and it shouldn't, but it does. But now it no longer has to, because Balance of Nature's whole health system gives me all the veggies, all the fruits, and beautiful drinks like the fiber and spice, which is my new favorite, which I have at night. So it just takes care of all of it. It takes the hassle out of it, guys. Plus, this new year, you can lock in 50% off for 1 year when you subscribe to the whole health system. So get it. It's so easy, a capsule, and it takes care of all of it. For you, for your kids, your whole family, it's so easy, and I'm so glad that I've discovered it. So make sure you go to balanceofnature.com.
My own father and aunt were at the front lines of desegregating schools 60 or 70, 60 years ago. And, they did not resist by bombing people and kidnapping people and raping people. What made the Black civil rights movement and what made the anti-apartheid movement so potent and powerful was that it was almost entirely a non-violent movement. Well, contrast that to the Palestinian movement for liberation, and it's all about violence. So what they've done is they've been able to weaponize, identity politics, intersectionality, and to turn it into an entirely different story to sort of fit their craven narrative. And the problem with America is that we're so stranglehold by identity politics, by the threat of being canceled, by the threat of being called racist, that, sensible people, I always like to say, woke culture thrives when perfectly reasonable people ignore their best interests. And this is a perfect example where we all know this is not true. We all know that this lie is being allowed to fester in our society, but people are too afraid of being canceled to stand up and say anything, and hence the lies continue. And that is their most potent weapon, is our own timidity.
Absolutely nailed it there, and along the lines of what Dr. Gard Saad talks about with the suicidal empathy. Now, I'm going to make a gross assumption here, and you can tell me to sod off if it's not true. Did you once find yourself more towards the left?
I mean, I would not say I've always been a registered independent. I grew up in California. I've never really bought the Democratic, load of whatever, and I never bought the Republican load of whatever. I think for me, being someone like me who has a lot of different identities and has had a lot of different vehicles and access to different communities and sort of seeing, what the Jewish people really think, what the Black people really think. I'm also gay, so what people really think. I've come to this sort of political existence with a lot of skepticism and a lot of questioning, and I really don't believe, any sort of surface level, crap, to be honest with you. I think my sort of evolution from the left has always been about the fact that this is what kind of activated me so much post October 7th was I saw all of these, identity groups that supposedly I am part of, African Americans, LGBTs, aggressively aligning themselves with, the Gaza pro-Palestinian, with anti-Zionism, aggressively denouncing Israel on October 7th while the blood was literally still flowing through the kibbutzim. So my only reaction was, you people do not speak for me. You are speaking on my behalf, but you people do not speak for me. I do not agree with this. And unlike most of you, I've spent years living in Israel, so I know what Israel is actually like. I know that it is not a genocidal society. I know it is not a nation built on white colonization. I do concede that when it comes to issues of equal rights for all of its citizens, Israel, like every other nation, and there's a double standard, has a way to go until all of its citizens have equality. But I live in the United States of America as an African American. So would I denounce my own country? America does too. Again, it goes back to the double standard, that somehow Israel has to exist in this state of ideological and political perfectionism, or else purism and perfectionism, essentialism, or else its citizens must be killed, because that's always the end result when you get there. So I think I've always been skeptical of the myth of identity politics, and I've also seen how it doesn't really work. It hasn't really worked in my family. It hasn't really worked in America in many ways. I've been at times a minority hire, and I didn't do very well in that job. It wasn't a great fit for me. Ironically, I actually felt in many ways much more respected as a person of color, as a minority, working for Rupert Murdoch in a more conservative publication, because there on a certain level, they weren't really interested in me as a minority person. Now, that is not to say that they couldn't have done better and necessarily engaged with what that meant. But then when I've worked for very liberal media, it's been all about that. It's been, you have to be a sort of model minority. And I've never been that kind of person. I've never lived up to that myth. So I've always failed in that regard. And I failed because it's fundamentally based on an untruth.
Yeah, look, this is such a fascinating conversation. As someone who also worked for Murdoch at Sky News, it was really, I'm conservative when it comes to the economy, national security, defense. I'm quite progressive socially. I've got a gay brother. I was, during the same-sex marriage debate here in Australia, and that didn't really fit in on Sky News Australia. But it didn't matter. I was allowed to say what I thought every single time and did so. But you're right. It's more of those, and Sky News as well, by the way, Murdoch again, would constantly have guests and consistently have guests from the left who would come on and engage in debate, which is far better television. The networks who were on the left would never invite conservatives on. There's an openness in conservative circles that doesn't really exist on the far left in most instances, not always, but in most cases.
I agree. I think there is on some level more gatekeeping on the far left, linguistic gatekeeping on the far left. And I think there's also sort of what I see amongst the far left today, amongst, the folks who exist in the kind of what we call the progressive bubble, is I'm actually surprised at how much they're doubling down on their rhetoric. Despite, we had a year now of Donald Trump saying the old order, no longer exists. We're not living in this sort of, extreme DEI existence that we did.
Well, Pete Hegseth was a perfect example with the pilots of the bomber jets during the 12-day war. And, he said the guys, and someone said, "Sir, you didn't say and the one girl who was there," and he just said, "We're actually not playing this game anymore." And as a woman, that did not offend me in the slightest. I went, there are more important things to talk about. They're not playing that game. You're absolutely right.
obviously the administration, needs to acknowledge the fact that, racism and sexism and things like that still exist.
Yeah,
We don't live in
of
a perfect society.
course.
But I do see that, despite all of this shift in the rhetoric coming from the top, what I do see is that the extreme left and what I would call the extreme progressives are actually doubling down. They're more invested in this than ever. And they're going to fight nail and tooth to maintain this world order because it's worked very well for them. I mean, there's a lot of money and a lot of prestige and a lot of elite access in sort of mimicking and parroting amongst leftists, amongst whatever all the other leftists are saying. And it's a very sort of easy narrative. It's very easy to sort of reduce everything to race and gender and sexual orientation, particularly if none of those things directly apply to you, which is what's the irony is that so many of those folks who are leading these conversations are just boring, regular old white people who have no stake in this thing.
What do they call them? Cis or straight or whatever it is. Like I say about my brother, being gay is the least interesting thing about him. The least interesting. He's a pilot. He's the nicest person. He's fascinating. He's like to focus and hone in on that. And that's what the left do consistently is it's boring. Move
it's
on.
boring, but it's
things.
worked. It's worked very, very
It's
well.
effective. Exactly.
And there's a lot of money in it. And I think we really don't acknowledge, the whole kind of, identity industrial complex that exists in America. And it's exceedingly well funded. And there's a lot. And it's also feel good and it's easy. And in some ways, of course, it is necessary. I mean, America does have a lot of work to do in terms of ensuring we have this ideal society that the founders charted out for us. But I do think that this cohort is going to fight to the death to maintain their status, and they're not going to let it go easily. The problem is that they've come up against Donald Trump, and he's a formidable foe.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. I want to finish in a couple of ways. First of all, to ask you about the situation in Iran and the complete lack of care from, again, those who mobilized intensely off the back of October 7, not for the victims of the world's largest loss of Jewish life since the Holocaust, of course, but for the perpetrators. But that aside, still mobilized and complete cricket silence, the Golden Globes. Not even one person, just, I mean, it ticks every box, like the feminist movement, human rights, people looking for freedom. You must just, again, the double standard's not a strong enough kind of description, is it? It's appalling.
Well, I also think it's just sort of emblematic of everything that's wrong with the culture in general. I mean, Israel is a very complex narrative and story to tell. And Iran is actually in many ways far more complex. It's a culture that's existed for thousands of years, that had, an unbroken monarchy for over millennia. It's a country that had, complex relationships with the West, with Israel before the Ayatollahs took control. It's a country that, was one of the largest oil producers and has, vast resources of oil. But of course, it's all been reduced to this sort of narrative of, post-colonial theory. Like, they're all after the oil. Well, perhaps there is, interest in making sure the oil doesn't wind up in Iran. Doesn't wind up in China and Russia. But don't forget, America's been oil independent, self-sufficient since the Obama years. I mean, we're not invading Iran to get the oil. And that's, something that folks on the left have parroted incessantly. Why the silence? It goes back to why the silence on everything right now is because the powers that be,
Christians in Nigeria,
exactly,
Kurds in Syria,
of course, Jews around the world, Jews in Israel, but of course also, the actual legitimate suffering of Palestinians under Hamas. Why the silence around that? The silence around that is because the gatekeepers of the dominant narratives, the progressive leftist media, haven't really demanded it. Where has been the article on the front page of the New York Times saying, where are the protesters? Where has been the op-ed saying that? Where has been the leadership of the major media in the U.S. and across the Western world saying, this is a failure of our collective will? nobody has demanded it of these people, and hence they're not rising to the occasion.
Yeah.
Where was the media after the Golden Globes last week saying why weren't the celebs wearing pins,
Correct.
to show their support of Iran when there was so much press
I said it very loudly, but not mainstream media. Yeah,
Right. And while
clearly.
there was so much press about who was wearing what when it came to Israel and
Yeah.
Gaza, where is the NAACP coming out demanding U.S. intervention in Iran, even though they demanded U.S. intervention in Israel? So, I
Yeah.
mean, you could say that, yes, there is the difference that, the U.S. does actively fund Israel. The U.S. has been, a lead ally of Israel for decades and decades. But fundamentally, this is a human rights issue. And the entire pro-Palestinian movement has been anchored around this idea of human rights for the
Yeah.
Palestinians. So, of course, I mean, it's a cliche to say, no Jews, no news, but look at the facts.
And it would also force them to confront that the same enemy in Iran who is slaughtering innocent people in the tens of thousands, the same one essentially behind the pro-Palestinian movement. It would force them to confront an evil that a lot of them, some of them knowingly, a lot of them unknowingly, have put their weight behind.
Well, Iran has been the biggest benefactor of Hamas, the
Head of
Houthis, and
geography.
Hezbollah, the Triple H's. So,
Absolutely.
and it would also really, I mean, as you said, it would demand that they confront their own hypocrisy. I mean, as you said,
Yeah.
look at Masa Amini, a couple years ago. I mean, who is more brave in this moment than a young Iranian woman tearing off her headscarf and confronting, the religious authorities in Tehran? There is no better example
Right.
of the nobility of human spirit and the bravery, of these young people, men and women, but especially women, because they have suffered even more under
Yeah.
the stranglehold of the mullahs. So, where's Greta Thunberg, taking her flotilla to Tehran? I mean, so again, it's all about, it goes back to the double standard, back to the
Yeah.
hypocrisy, back to what I call the great lie. And, we in America, I mean, we kind of love our great lies. That's how we've kind of propelled our society all these years. And the
Yeah.
lie that we are truly, a progressive, liberal, equal nation for everybody, it's just not true. It's not true if you're an ethnic minority on one side, but it's also not true if you are a freedom fighter fighting for a revolution that somehow the woke West doesn't deem worthy.
Worthy. The other thing that about the Golden Globes that I found, I mean, not surprising, it was completely unsurprising. Amal Clooney, off the back of literally a week before her husband announcing that she worked with the Muslim Brotherhood, a designated terrorist organization in multiple countries around the world, including Muslim nations, a country in which it was founded, at the Golden Globes, and not one journalist thought to approach her and put her on the spot. Can you imagine if that had been someone talking about a neo-Nazi group or some big celebrity saying, well, my wife, Cindy was doing some, pro bono work for the Nazis the other day. She would have been hammered. Not a word, nobody even thought to even,
Yeah.
Amal, is this, and don't tell me they didn't have access or they couldn't. They reach everyone. They can reach you.
Well,
They did not care.
again, these are the same folks who are always out, championing the dispossessed and championing the poor people,
Yeah.
championing Black and brown people. But really, all they care about is maintaining their elite status and privilege
And the
in this
moral
small world
superiority.
in which
Yeah.
they are, at the top. That's all they really care about, because that's what, feeds their ego, it feeds their bank account, it allows them to exist in this sort of, gilded existence. It's all about maintaining their status, privilege, and elitism, even though those are all the things they say they're fighting against. I mean, one great example is that, Mamdani, when he applied to college, as we learned last summer, he applied, despite the fact he has this famous movie star mother and a famous professor father, and grew up and went to a fancy private school and grew up in a multi-million-dollar loft in Chelsea, he applied to college. All that privilege and access, he still applied to college pretending to be an African-American and a Black person. And as an actual Black person, I find that incredibly offensive. But
Absolutely.
what's the worst part about it is that had he been white, let alone Jewish, don't even get started, but had he been white, his campaign would have been over the next day.
So
The next
true.
day. And instead, what did the New York
Didn't care.
Times do? The New York Times wrote a story, and the headline literally said, Zohran Mamdani applied to college as an African American. Should it matter? And right there, they're saying it might
can't.
not matter. Right there, they were shutting down the conversation. Whereas had he been white, again,
Oh,
talk Jewish, it would have been the only thing that mattered. And that's the hypocrisy.
absolutely.
That's the lie.
There's no stronger way to end this. David, you are amazing. Thank you so, so much for joining me here on the Erin Molan Show. I'm so grateful for your time, and stay safe in this storm. You've got 2 kids. Are you outside making snowman? Like, what do you do? We don't have it here in Australia.
They're out with dad number 2, and I've been just doing work, and they're everybody's fine. Everybody's fine. Lots of food, lots of snow, lots of Netflix and video games, and lots of YouTube. Everything's good.
Lots of the Erin Molan Show as a family sitting around. Legend. Thank you so much.
Cheers. Thank you.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed the show. Make sure you share. I've got to run. I'm heading to the airport to head to Washington for the premiere of Melania. Love you all. Tomorrow's episode will be with her chief advisor, and he goes deep. By the way, the revelations, particularly regarding her and President Trump, cannot wait for you to watch this interview. We'll see you then. Love you all.